the conflict management, I'm a big believer in observation, feeling, need, request. This is essentially the art of nonviolent communication. It is extremely powerful. Anytime that you have a conflict with anybody, work or outside of it, this tool, this methodology around how to handle conflict has been one of the most effective, formulas for totally diffusing conflict. It follows observation, feeling, need, request. I'll explain each one of them right now. Observation is essentially a verifiable fact. It is undeniable. It is something that no one can dispute. It is not an opinion. It is not anything. It is fact. And by the way, when it comes to doing this, it's better to do this observation, feeling, need, request immediately after something's happened, because then there's less room for doubt. So, observation, it could be something more along the lines of like, hey, I just observed that you interrupted me 3 times during this conversation. If I interrupted you 3 times during the conversation, then I interrupted you 3 times during the conversation. I can't deny that. Like, you can't say, well, I observed you being a total jerk and being mean to me and not letting me speak. That's not an observation. That's an opinion. That's like you putting something on them, and it causes them to be defensive. But if you say, hey, I just observed that you interrupted me 3 times in the last 5 minutes during this conversation, that's an undeniable fact. That's huge. So that's the first part, observation. Second part, feeling. How does that make you feel? Now, feelings are not thoughts. Like, feelings aren't, I think you're, doing this to make me mad. Or I think that you're just not being nice to me. That's not a feeling. Feelings are frustration, anger, being mad, madness, jealousy, sadness. I mean, these are all feelings that you can have. Embarrassment. For the interruption example, you could say I'm frustrated. It makes me feel frustrated. Don't elaborate on your feelings, just say the feeling itself. If you elaborate on it, that's how you can get people to feel defensive and potentially start, nitpicking some specific words that you use when you say that. So literally just say the feeling, because that's something that everyone can relate to. Everyone can relate to a feeling. Need is a higher power. It's like a meta, like bigger than yourself need that you have that anyone can relate to. So your need could be, I need to feel like when I'm entering conversations that my opinion is heard and that I am being respected when I have something to say. That's a valid need. That's not something that's to be scoffed at. That's not something that, very, very few people would disagree with that need. So need is something that's like on a meta, higher level, like, hey, you probably agree with me too, that you need to feel respected during a conversation. And they're going to put 2 and 2 together that, okay, my, observation that I interrupted you 3 times, the feelings that I made you frustrated, the need is to feel respected in the conversation. These are all things that I can, one, agree with and understand. And then finally, your request. Now, the key thing with the request is that it's got to be a little bit flexible. You can't give someone a concrete request and say, hey, my request that you never interrupt me again. That's not realistic. That's a little bit overkill, because the likelihood of never interrupting you again, pretty low. But you can say, hey, my request is that you're cognizant of when I'm speaking and that you try not to interrupt me. That's something they can probably agree to. That's something that's pretty fair. It's a low barrier, a low threshold for agreement to, and it gets them knowledgeable and at least conscious of what they're doing. More often than not, people develop conflict with somebody else and the other person doesn't realize that it's creating conflict. And that's the funniest part, that's the craziest part, is when we're in the workplace, we're just acting and we think that we're all on the same team here. We're all trying to make our business better. We're all trying to do good work. Sometimes we have our own special way of doing it, and sometimes we don't believe that we're all trying to do our own good work. Maybe we think people are trying to sabotage, but in reality, people more often than not are not trying to sabotage anybody. They're just trying to do their best jobs. But they don't realize that they're creating conflict in your world. It's up to you to communicate that to them. If you sit there passively, aggressively, and not say a word, it's your fault for being frustrated at your coworker or your colleague or your husband or wife, or, you can apply this to personal conflicts that you've got. So the point I'm making is, when it comes to conflict management, I'm a huge believer in observation, feeling, need, request. So if you ever have something that happens at work, take a minute, write down your observation, feeling, need, request, then you ask to have a meeting, you lay it on them, and you tell them exactly how it is, and they're going to be understanding. If you go in and you say, you know, I think you're being a jerk, or I think you're trying to sabotage me, or I think you're doing all these negative things towards me, it creates room for being defensive and an argument, and potentially widening the gap between you and the person you're speaking with having a successful resolution. So that is my beliefs on conflict resolution. I think that is probably one of the best ways to manage conflict in the workplace.